Hello everybody, welcome to the Go language course. In this video, I'm going to discuss the use of anonymous functions. And before I do so, I have to include the main package on the first line of the program. And then I have to import the fmt package so that I'm able to use the printline function coming from this package. Now let us go to the main function, and I'm going to discuss the meaning of an anonymous function. An anonymous function is just a function that has no name. And how can we make an anonymous function? We can have a simple way of doing so. We can just define and immediately invoke an anonymous function. So I can say func followed by an empty pair of parentheses, and then I have to say something like, here I want to print a statement on the monitor, and then I can add a pair of parentheses at the end. So I'm able to just define it and invoke the anonymous function immediately. So let us see how I can get the result. Okay, you can see that I'm able to just execute the anonymous function and get hello world coming from the content in the anonymous function. And then we can also assign an anonymous function to a variable, and I just use this variable directly by passing the arguments into it. So it can even be put inside the main function. So this is a simple example of these descriptions. So I have a function which is an anonymous one that has no name inside, and you can see that I have now got some function parameters to use. And I have to declare the return type of this anonymous function. And this anonymous function is just doing the multiplication of two input values passed to it. And then you can see that I'm able to assign an anonymous function to a variable called product. So you see this is an anonymous function content, and the whole function will be assigned to the product variable. So how can I use it? I can do something like this in the main function. So the assignment of an anonymous function to a variable can be done inside a main function. And how can I use the function variable? I can just say product, and then I put 4 and 8. Then this 4 and this 8 will be passed to the anonymous function, and the anonymous function would return the product, and then this product will be attached to this product variable. Okay, so let us see the result. Yes, you can see 32 coming out because this 4 and this 8 will be multiplied together, and the return value will be shown up when I use the product variable name here. So when I use the variable that is meaning the anonymous function that I'm using, the passed values will be put into the anonymous function that this product variable is corresponding to, and the calculation can be evaluated, and the printline function here is just able to show the content returned by the anonymous function corresponding to the product variable. Okay. And we can also use an anonymous function as the parameter type. So I'm going to use a simple example to illustrate the meaning of an anonymous function being the parameter type. So here I want to make a function called final price. Okay. And this final price function has two parameters. One is float 64 type, and the other one is the discount func type. So what is the discount func type? It is actually a user-defined function type, and I can just define this function type by using an anonymous function. Okay, so you can see that I say func float 64 float 64. So I pass a float 64 value into the anonymous function, and this anonymous function would return a value of float 64 type. So this discount func is really a function type, and this anonymous function type is used in the final price function that I'm going to do here. Okay, So when I use the final price function, you can see that I have 100, which is the first value, I mean the total here, and the 10% off is actually the of discount func type. So what is the meaning of 10% off here? Let us see. The 10% off here is actually a function that accepts one parameter of float64 type and returns a value of float64 type, okay? And this 10% off function is just getting 90% of the original value passed to the function, okay? So in essence, 10% off is a function that has the same method signature as the anonymous function type, okay? So you can see that both the discount func type and my 10% off type would have the same method signature, float64 as the input and float64 as the output, okay? And then this 10% off function is really of the discount func type here, so I can just pass this function into the final price function, so that the discount parameter here is referring to the 10% off function that is passed to the parameter of the final price function. And this 10% off function is of discount func type because the discount func and the 10% off functions would have the same method signature, okay? And the final price function here is to return the discount, which is an argument of total. So discount here is actually the discount parameter name here. So this parameter name here is being replaced by the actual function called 10% off. So discount here is actually the 10% off here. So 10% off followed by the total is just doing the 90% of the original total value passed to the 10% off function. And I will just get the final price value as 90% of the total value, okay? So let us see how I can run it. Yes, when I have 100 here, the 10% off function is able to help me get 90% of it. That's why I will have a return value of 90 from the final price function, okay? So this final price function has an anonymous function as the parameter type, which is meaning the discount func here, okay? Actually, we can also return an anonymous function. How can I do so? Let us see the following example. Now I have a function called multiplier. So I define this function that would return an anonymous function. So what is the implementation of the anonymous function, which would become the output of the multiplier function? Let us see. So this anonymous function would need an input parameter. So you can see that when I want to return that anonymous function, I have to indicate the input parameter here. And the output data type of the anonymous function is integer. So I have to say integer after mentioning the input parameter of my function to be returned. How can I implement this anonymous function? I can just take x from the return function and I multiply that x with the value called vector coming from the calling function of the anonymous function, which is now the multiplier function, okay? So it is a bit abstract. We can go to the example to see what it means. So I want to say multiplier 2, and I want to store the result of multiplier 2 into a variable called double. So what does it mean by this instruction? Let us see. Multiplier 2 here is meaning that I want to put 2 into the vector variable, okay? And this vector variable would be put into the anonymous function content, and the multiplier is actually a function, so it will use the 2 passed to the multiplier function. And how can I make use of the vector passed into the multiplier function? Let us see. We have the double variable here, which is actually a function because the multiplier function would just return an anonymous function. And this returned anonymous function would also accept one argument, which is 5 here. So this 5 will be put to the x variable here. And when 2, which is meaning the vector variable, is multiplied by the 5, which is represented by x here, I will have 5 times 2, which is equal to 10. So when I double the value of 5, I will have 10 as the answer to come up. And similarly, I can do multiplier 3 here. So this 3 will be the value of vector And this vector will be part of the anonymous function that will be returned by the multiplier function. So this triple here will have a factor of 3 into it. And when I call the triple function by passing a 5 here, the 5 here will become my x in the return function, which is an anonymous function. And 5 will become x. So 5 together with 3 that has already passed to the return function when I call the multiplier function, I'm able to get 5 times 3, which is 15. So 15 will be returned and it will be printed. So let us see the result of running this program. Okay, you can see 10 and 15 here. 10 is equal to 2 times 5, and 15 here is coming from 3 times 5. So you can see that the multiplier function returns a function, and the returned function can accept another argument to do further manipulation. So this video has discussed the use of anonymous functions in Go language. We can make our anonymous function immediately inside the main function, and I just invoke this anonymous function directly. And I can also make an anonymous function that will be assigned to a variable. So the variable here is actually a function, and I can use this function directly by passing arguments into it, and the arguments will be put into the anonymous function content, and the arguments can be handled to have other things to come out. Also, we can return an anonymous function. So here for the multiplier function, here I can just return an anonymous function so that the multiplier function can have some arguments, and the returned anonymous function can have its own parameters that can be manipulated together with the values obtained by the outer function of the returned anonymous function. And we can use an anonymous function as the parameter type directly. So here I want to use a function that accepts a value and a function here, okay, and the function is really a anonymous function type, okay. So the anonymous function can be treated as a type, and my function that is passed as the parameter of this funded price function has to follow the same method signature as my discount func type, okay. This is the end of the video. If you have any questions about my video, please leave your questions on the comment section below the video. If you like this video, please give me a like and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.